Daughter of Serpents, or The Scroll as it was renamed for the CD version back in 1995, is set in 1920s. You and your customizable character must travel to Alexandria, Egypt for a business trip exploring an archaeological dig to look at a Ptolemaic-era tomb. Side note, if you have time, the Ptolemaic period is actually super fascinating and you should give it a read, or, if reading ain't your thing, Assassin's Creed Origins is set completely in that period. Ptolemaic period is actually super fascinating, and we are closer to the Ptolemaic period and that Ptolemaic era than the Ptolemaic era is to the start of ancient Egypt. Fun fact. Anyway, I was playing the floppy DOS version, but apparently the CD version is different in a lot of ways. You must solve a mystery involving stolen artifacts, a mysterious cult, Cleopatra and Mark Antony, and a world-ending evil that gets in the way. Sprinkle in a little Lovecraftian horror, and you have Daughter of Serpents. It's a very short game, took me about 2 hours and 15 minutes to complete, but I did have to restart a couple times, because when you mess up, it just takes you to a screen that you can't interact with, or at least I couldn't, and then I had to close and restart DOSBox and go to another save. Daughter of Serpents can probably be pounded out in about 30 minutes to an hour if you know what you're doing. Probably good for a speed run. While I did enjoy reading the historical facts that you could read in the game, it doesn't do much regarding the story. There's a lot to read, but none of it changes the story. It reminds me a lot of Versailles, A Game of Intrigue, or Versailles 1685 that I did a retrospective on. Lots of info in it, but it has no bearing on the story, so it feels like a waste of space to include it. There are 3 endings based on skill point allocation at the start of the game, but all the endings are the same conclusion-wise and general plot-wise. It just depends who you take with you at the end. Audio is often quiet or loud and out of nowhere. Honestly, I think there are only 3 songs in the entire game, which, it's a short game, you don't need a whole bunch. One is like a fast, upbeat, jazzy song. There's a synth Arabian feel, because you gotta get that Arabian feeling song. And I think there's like a weird xylophone one for those tense moments, but I think those last 2 might just be different parts of the same song that they play. I have no idea. And there is no voice acting and very little, if any, sound effects. Visually, it is not a stunning game and lacks in some, basic animations. It really sticks out when you notice it. In 1992, the year the game came out, or at least the floppy version, we had games like Laura Bow and the Dagger of Amun, we had Doom, Wing Commander, and Wolfenstein 3D. This looks a little dated, especially compared to those games. I know it was a small team that worked on this, but that excuse can only go so far because a lot of those games I mentioned were developed by small teams as well. The text is incredibly difficult to read with some words. I don't know if it's the text they chose, I don't know if it's custom-made text, or if it's just the individual letter block size, but some words you have to guess what it is. But the handwriting section in the journal you keep is easier to read than the normal print. It's a weird mix between the art, because some of the art is kinda ugly, but other stuff like the god in the portal is extremely beautiful. But if you're like me, who can't see some colors, all you see is just one color blobs half the time. The lead artist, Pete Lyon, I'm pretty sure I butchered that, went to Egypt and took pictures of everything and used reference photos from old hotels that were there at the time to get everything as close as possible, and it shows in the background art. It's beautiful. It just seems like the characters lack. It feels like there was 2 different artists doing things here. I did like the inventory screen. You pick up things and put things on there. It's like an old desk mat kind of thing. And off to the left you have your map, petty cash cookbook. I don't know why there's a cookbook, but there is one. A guidebook, journal for reading historical facts and things, and a notebook to read what you just did. It automatically, puts things in there for you. I'm also a fan of the box art. There are 4 covers, 2 for floppy and 2 for CD. 2 for North America and 2 for Europe, Gameplay is very common. You can see it on screen. It's point and click, very common from the MS-DOS era. Even today, there's a lot of point and click games made. The game is pretty straightforward, but I did have to use a walkthrough for the last day in the game, as it gets a little convoluted with what steps it wants to have done in what order. And you know, some of those old games, they're very like, I want these steps in this order, and you can't deviate from that even if it makes no sense. You can totally fail and have to restart, and if you don't have the game saved or multiple saves, you have to go back to the beginning. Amen. Gotta love when that happens. There's really no way to get a bad ending, I think. Either you finish it or it just takes you to a screen where you have to quit and restart and go over it again. I don't think there's any way to fail this game. Gameplay, like I said, very stock standard, point and click. Put this together, combine this thing, solve this mystery. So, what is my verdict on this game? I know it seems like I was being a little harsh on the art. I did enjoy that at the start of the game you get to make your own character, 6 to choose from, and you get to decide male, female, nationality, name, title, profession. You get to allocate skill points, although there really is no point to the skill points. The only good thing they do is change some story elements, but even if your character doesn't have specific things in that story element, they're explained to you anyway, so it makes the points almost irrelevant. I don't know. According to the Wikipedia, the CD version, you can choose from only 2 predetermined characters. You must also acquire the map, guidebook, and cookbook rather than start with them like in the floppy versions. I have no idea why there was such a difference in the game and gameplay between the floppy and CD version. I would love to get my hands on the CD version if anybody can help me, or the floppy version if anybody out there can help me. I did enjoy a good bit of the Lovecraft feel throughout. I love a good Lovecraftian feeling game. And most of the art, like I said, is nice. Just some of it feels like the character models, well, they're not models, character textures kind of failed or suffered. It really feels like this game was a little too short for me to really judge it. I feel like just as I was starting to understand how the game played, how the story worked, who the characters were, it ends in the most anticlimactic way. While sometimes I do enjoy a good sweet game over a 100-hour epic, don't get me wrong, I do love my Witchers, my Assassin's Creed, Horizon Zero Dawn, like all those epic games. Most of the time, I don't have time to sit down and play them, so I just like to have, a good little play session in with a nice little game that I can get done in a few hours or a day or so. There are way better DOS-themed Egyptian games out there. Or if you're feeling something a little modern, like I said, Assassin's Creed Origins is amazing. And if you're into no combat, because sometimes I just want to walk around not having to fight things, there is a museum mode where it's just learning. I feel like the Daughter of Serpents wanted to be a Nancy Drew or Sherlock Holmes style adventure game, but with the education of Encarta. And this is the same thing I said in my retrospective for Versailles. It wants to be an adventure game, but with the smarts of Encarta, but it fails. And a few of the original reviews I could find for this gave it the same feeling. They gave it half scores or some even lower. I think this is another one to skip over playing, but buying if you can find the physical CD or floppy, that's gotta be a rare one and you gotta hold on to it. This game, I appreciate the hard work that went into it, but Daughter of Serpents just feels a little flat.